And I believe it's going to load. So we'll be going live in about 5 seconds.
Just give me a signal.
All right, we're Marge Piercy live in 5, 2, 1. Hi, welcome to Virtual Dire Literary Series. I'm Timothy Gager, and our special guest tonight is Ms. Marge Piercy, and she's going to read. She's got a new book that came out this week, and I'm sure we'll talk about that a bit. And she's going to read from it as well. And I'm going to do the full introduction. If I can set this up properly. Yeah, here's the full introduction. So instead of me reading the Marge's bio, here it is. So Marge has only written 17 novels, and this new book of poetry that she has out this week is her 20th. And if you haven't heard of her or read her, please check it out. And this is her new book, which she's reading from tonight. On the way out, turn off the light. And Marge is in an area that all of her indie bookstores are closed and not online. So do yourself a favor and order it from your favorite indie bookstore. Otherwise, it might close as well. So without any further accolades, Miss Marge Piercy.
The first poem I'll read is Being Old at the End of the World. It isn't that I think life will end. Gaia is ingenious and life breeds life in new forms. The gorgeous predators will have succumbed to the most savage predator of all. We will have killed off frogs, half the birds, most fish, whales and bears and butterflies. But something will rise to replace. We sneer at dinosaurs, but they destroyed little and endured long. Greed was only born with us. We didn't invent war. Rats and ants, chimps and others fight each other with teeth, claws, superior numbers. But our wars kill everything around, and damage lasts decades or close to forever. Gaia will be glad to be rid of us, her obnoxious tenants. Our dirt and waste will long outlast us. Perhaps new life forms will evolve to eat plastic and drink radiation. They'll have to. The afterlife of old desires. The things we wanted but never got. Those desires that were starved, stunted, thrust into a dark closet, what happened to them? Did they die tragically in their tombs like Aida in the last act, seeing arias of loss? Or just age like old letters that yellow and flake to dust? Are they living in the walls of our present, like mice scuttling at night in search of crumbs of regret or hope too slight to maintain them? Do they imagine returning, sonorous and full-throated to claim us again, to pursue those we desired, now gray as lichens and dry as sandpaper? Do they dream of sprouting one dawn, mushrooms from a vast underground mycelium? But we've gone on, and they're ghosts no one heeds or fears. I wrote this right after the last election. It's called Dirge for My Country. My country, you are hurtling us into a dark morass. In that old war, I understood the Viet Cong better than I understood the Pentagon. Alienated at daily war in the streets and movement lofts against my government, yet I felt hope at least. sometimes that we were pushing hard enough to birth a dream of equality. Step by step, those with stifled voices, those dealt day by day fresh wounds in their minds, their backs, their cunts, their very skin punished for itself, moved a step closer to evident selfhood, a step closer to that picnic in the sun of dignity on the grass of survival, our culture melding. We seem to be growing up slowly to a willingness to listen to those who don't look like our mirror image, and turn to those perhaps we'd feared and turned to boogeymen. We seem to be almost arriving at something halfway holy and adult. Was it all seeming, all a moment? We are rushing backward to a war against our best selves. We're suckling hatred, eating hatred for breakfast and lunch, snacking on hatred, fattening on it, bloated with it. We'll dance on the corpse of good ideas. We'll burn dissenters like witches. Is this the end of the good my country might have done? And the last poem I'll read is called Joy to the World. Now I must learn to understand, to accept deaths of those I've loved, the pain of weak joints, memory full of holes that days' faces slip through. There is no other life but this, with all its grime and guts. Breathing becomes an art. Every moment is still new and the sun rises whether we see it or not. Every flower is a gift I've lived to smell. Love grows more intensely in the twilight. I polish old memories, amber taking on heat and power as till they shine. There is no boredom now, for each moment is precious as a kitten and requires much care. What can I take for granted now? My own hand is strange to me. I dream less and sleep more deeply. I let ambition rise, drift off like a helium-filled balloon until it's just a speck, free of its prods and jerks. I sit in every hour seeking to enjoy it. Everything slow ebbs and glides away, away. My body has its own agenda, carrying me along. Praise my aching body that still gives me pleasure in the arms of my long love. Praise the land that feeds me and many wild creatures that still gives me joy and each with its colors and otherness. Praise friends who help and companion me. Praise my cats with their loyalty. So much of my life was struggle to survive, to learn, to write what I had to find love. I let go of all but love now, till the end. Is that the right length?
Thank you so much. That was wonderful.
Encore, encore.
Yeah, that was great. That last one was great.
I loved the one about the desire.
One more.
I loved it so much.
Please more.
So will you do a poetry encore? We'll hold up our lighters. You can read one more.
Okay. A sea change. The wreck of a destroyer from a war long over, as much as wars ever end, now most don't, lies under the ocean, resting on the semi-sandy bottom. Bones, I imagine, stripped inside, implements of destruction and the destroyed. But the creatures of the sea, have transformed it into a reef of many colors, crusted with shells, anemones waving their filmy fronds, fuchsia, gold, and cerulean fish dart through. It's colonized, painted, turned from the sheen of death to a little bright hill teeming with life, a work of art and nature. When we vanish from earth, we see what beauty will conquer.
Thank you very much, Marge. So I'm going to ask a few questions. So
Oh, look, it sends up backwards.
I know for me, it will show up forward, I believe. So my first question is about your new book. Congratulations on that. And I am wondering, with your new book, is there an intended theme, or do themes just kind of find their way into collections of your work?
No, I write 2 or 3 poems every week. When I'm putting a book together, I look at the better of the poems I've written, and I look for themes and sections, and I look for a progression. I want the book to be an artifact in itself, not just a random collection. And it should have a progression.
Okay. And with that progression, and you're very active in your writing. You're very prolific, and
I didn't teach at a university. I decided years ago that if I taught, I would never write what I had to write. I would begin writing for academics and not for people. One of the poets that people put up my poems on the wall. They use them at wedding ceremonies. They use my poems. When a friend dies at memorials, To Be of Use must have been read by several hundred memorials by now. My poems are for people, not for teaching in colleges.
So how do you feel about students that go to colleges and get advanced degrees in writing or in poetry? I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
I don't think it's a great idea. It's much better not to be teaching. It's much better when you can listen to people. I live in a place where there are a whole lot of different kinds of people. It's a village. I know plumbers, I know fishermen, I know oystermen, I know people who work in stores, I know people who rent cottages. I know a lot of people who aren't academics. When you're in a college, it's a certain environment. I live out in the world, and I think that as a writer, that was important to me. I understood. I come out of stoneworking class background. And I didn't want to become an academic. I took my master's degree. I passed the exam with the highest score they'd ever had. They said, you only need to take one more class and your master's thesis you can develop in your PhD. I said, no, thank you. Bye-bye. I'll go and do part-time jobs. And I was very poor for quite a while. And it was hard to get published. My poems got published relatively early, but my fiction couldn't get published till the world changed, until women were allowed to have a voice about women. Until then, I couldn't really get any of my novels published.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I have a collection of about 20 Ibbotson Street journals, and I'm in those 20 of them, and I thought that was a lot, but you're in each and every one of them. Do you have a personal relationship with the people that put out Ibbotson, or they just love your work?
Put out what?
Ibbotson Street Press?
Oh, I don't have a personal relationship, but they always ask me for poems, and I give them poems, especially around the Jewish holidays, because the editor likes that. In fact, I sent him a poem I wrote on Yom Kippur, not for the magazine, just for him, about doing it alone instead of in a group.
Well, speaking of themes, someone asked They love how you deal with the theme of aging. And he writes, you need more of that. Is that a conscious theme in your work?
Of course, I'm 84.
Wow. Um,
I have to think about aging. I have to think about dying. I am very conscious of these things. And I wanted to write honestly about it. That whole section that's in the book is I wanted to write very honestly about what it feels like to grow old, to suffer the infirmities of age, and to contemplate death, and to lose friends.
Someone wrote, they love the sound of where you live. Is it a small town?
It's a village. And I live in the woods outside the village.
So is it true that it takes a village or?
I don't have children, so. But I love it here. It's very beautiful in a small, quiet way. It's not spectacular like the Cascades or the Rocky Mountains or the up the high desert. It's a quiet beauty. And there's a lot of animals here. There's the coy wolves. People call them coyotes, but they're 60% wolf. And they breed true, and they live in wolf packs. There's an alpha, beta, and the rest of the wolf pack. There are fisher cats. We don't have foxes right now. We lost our foxes to mange last year. I had a resident fox for a number of years. I love foxes. I love to watch them. There are possums, there are moles, voles, weasels, everything, because we live in the woods.
So, all right. So another question here from Amy is, how do deadlines affect your writing?
How do I deadline?
Yeah, how do deadlines affect your writing?
I set my own deadlines. I mean, I write a poem. Usually I put it away. I look at it maybe a week. Some I revise and revise and revise. Others just, like everybody, once in a while, once comes. Almost always I diddle with them somewhat. I don't work on Mondays. Mondays I deal with bills, laundry. My assistant comes in on that day, Monday. We do with everything. He sends out the poems for me. We keep track of where they are and so forth.
It sounds like a great system to have someone do your submissions for you. So
Yeah,
you also said that
I am well.
Yeah. You said you do a weekly Zoom. When you do a weekly Zoom, is that a workshop type?
No, that's not weekly, once a month. But I've been doing Zooms because people ask me to, like you did.
Is that a workshop? Because you usually do a workshop. Are you doing that this year? Is one of the
I
questions.
don't know if I'm going to be able to do it this year. I couldn't do it in June. In October, I rescheduled for October, but we couldn't do it in October because no one was allowed in the Massachusetts. Only 3 of the people came from any place where they were allowed in. And I'm not willing to do the workshop on Zoom. It's not that kind of workshop. It's a very interactive workshop. It's a juried workshop. I open it up every year around December 1st. And I keep it open till the end of January. And as it fills up, and I get some alternates. I always have 2 alternates because somebody always drops out when it's May and it's time to send me 15 new poems. And on the mornings we meet. We were meeting at the COA, the Council on Aging, which has coffee, scones, and very comfortable chairs around a long table. Now, I only take 12 people. A lot of them are still in touch with me. I've been doing it since 2011. And some of them, often they form a group and stay in touch with each other. And we set it up so that they have a private Facebook group so they can go on sharing work after the workshop. We do, in the morning we meet there. I do some lectures. I have handouts. We discuss. We do some of their poems. I give them assignments. In the afternoons, I do on my own land. Either if it's nice in the gazebo, screened in gazebo, if not on the sun porch or inside. And we do half-hour conferences through the week. That's what the 15 poems are for. The conference is based on those 15 poems.
So your monthly readings you do on Zoom, where might people find those? Do you post them? Is it at a regular Zoom room? What can you tell us about that?
No, I don't pay any attention to them. Once I've done them, I figured people do something with them. I don't know what they do. Sometimes when you're doing a paid reading, they leave it up for 24 hours, then they take it down. That's a fairly common practice with the paid readings.
Susan wanted to know if you had a writing partner, in other words, someone that you trust to read the early versions of your poems or other works.
I did when Melanie was here. Melanie's my chosen daughter. I've often shared work with her. And sometimes I share it with my husband if I think it's something that'll interest him. I'm pretty critical. I go over them again and again and again. And I have this poetry group that meets once a month. We were meeting here. Now we're meeting on Zoom. And we bring our poems and discuss them and critique them. And that's very useful. The poems that are new and that I'm still working on, I bring to that group, and it's very helpful. They're all real published poets, etc. 3 of them took my workshop, and they live close enough on the Cape so that people come from all over the workshop. I've had people from Switzerland, Sweden, Great Britain, Australia, Brazil. My translator lives in Brazil, and he writes in both English and Brazilian Portuguese.
All right, I'm going to question here, and I jump back to what you were talking about, academic poetry. So what do you think differentiates academic poetry from poetry that's unique language in different ways? For example, Forrest Gander. So we're curious about your thoughts on this. And is there a balance, do you feel, in between?
It's simply that what academics tend to like is things that they can write their PhD on. They want poetry that is not really too accessible, because you can't write a lot on that. And they're writing often for other academics and other poets.
So speaking about balancing things, you write in many different genres. Do you have a favorite or a go-to, or do you write like certain things on a whim, or is it like, do you get in for example, a poetry zone, or if you're working on a book of nonfiction, is that what you focus on straight through? What's your process around that?
You don't ever write a novel on a whim, because it's like a marriage. You're in it for 2-3 years. You think a lot about it before you start. I've stopped writing novels because I can't get them published now. I'm too old. I've aged out of New York. I have a novel that I like a lot, and people say, well, it's really interesting, but we don't think it's commercial. So I am probably going to try to find a small press that's interested in it, but I haven't had time to do it. Things are kind of busy. I'm politically engaged. We have a sort of truck farm, and I'm very involved in my community and so forth.
Would you ever self-publish the novel that you like?
Do you ever what?
Would you ever self-publish the novel that you like?
No, self-publishing is too much work. I'm lazy in that respect. I want somebody else to do that. We ran a publishing company for 10 years, 11 years actually. And then
That was Leapfrog, right?
we sold it. Yes. And I published one book of poetry with that, so which is still in print, even though we sold it. But no, I never thought I would publish my own novel with that.
So the
Also, the problem with novels now is if you're a serious writer, you get so little money for it. It's like putting in all that. I make much more money on my poetry. Well, I certainly did when I used to do readings all over the place. I can't believe sometimes how much I traveled. For years, I used to go off on a plane somewhere 2-3 times a month. Sometimes doing 2 or 3 readings, sometimes a tour. I can't believe. I used to go to Europe a lot because they'd bring me over mostly when novels came out. In those days, there was an interest in American fiction. Now, nobody wants anything to do with us.
It's interesting what you're talking about, that poetry makes money. There's so much free content out there, either online or in online journals that are just free, and the poet doesn't get paid.
They sometimes want you to pay to read the stuff. I will not do that. It's submittable charges. I don't submit to them. I cannot afford to pay them to read my work. I haven't paid anybody to read my work in my entire life, and I'm not about to start. I resent that enormously. It's the readings, and it's I did my own audiobook for this on the way out, turn off the light, and I got paid for that. And it's audiobooks right now of everything are paying. I mean, they used to, like, you'd sell it, you'd have an audiobook, they'd give you $200. Now they give a couple thousand at least. They're big in Europe. During COVID, they're huge. So audiobooks are really a big thing right now. So I spent 3 days reading this. The director interrupting me every 2 seconds. But I did it, and I did a good job. I made her cry.
Oh. Last question of the night is usually my question. You're very active in anti-war and in feminist and environmental causes. It just seems like recently those are all kind of going backwards, and there's more of a fight or a fight against those causes. What do you think we have to do to get everyone on board with these no-brainer type of things? How do we
organize every which way you can? If you don't reach out to other people, if you only talk to your friends, you're not getting any place.
All right. Well, Marge, thank you very much for being with us. I'm going to unmute everybody to so they can. Maybe I didn't unmute them all. I hate having that single bit of applause. Let's try that again.
Bravo.
Yay!
It was an honor. It was an honor to hear you.
Awesome.
It definitely was.
It was a great job. And
Thank you.
be sure to check out her new book. Support your indie bookstores. Keep them in business, and support Marge. What you read from this book tonight was wonderful, and I'm sure the entire book is simply marvelous.
Yeah, have you got a copy yet?
Not yet. I will definitely buy a copy.
So
A box of my books to the wrong author in Canada. There's nobody in Knopf right now. The offices are empty. My editor is hanging out in South Carolina, and half the time I can't reach her. Whoever send out books from the printer send them to this woman in Canada. It's all insane. It's completely just. broken.
So
I
right
have
now
a
we're gonna.
poem called- I have a poem called "The End of the Empire," about how everything is falling apart.
Very much.
Yep. So right now we're gonna stop the Facebook.